I stood outside the wedding hall, watching the golden light spill across the pavement like liquid fire. Laughter drifted from inside, soft, warm, familiar, the kind of laughter that used to fill our living room before everything shattered. 11 years. 11 long, quiet years since I'd last heard my family's voices. My hands were cold, even though the night was calm. I'd spent the entire day convincing myself that I didn't care, that this was just another event, another hall, another memory to walk through. But standing there, I realized some ghosts don't live in the past. They live in the echoes that never fade. I took a breath. The scent of roses and champagne floated through the air. Somewhere inside, a string quartet was playing Canon in D, my mother's favorite piece. I almost smiled. Some things never change, and yet everything had. For a moment, I saw my reflection in the glass doors, calm, composed, a woman who had built her own empire from nothing. The world called me Clara Morgan, CEO of Solvra Industries, but in that reflection, I could still see Clara Miller, the daughter who was told she wasn't worth the price of her sister's education. My heart thudded once, heavy, deliberate. This wasn't revenge. Not the kind that comes with flames or fury. I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came here to exist and quietly, completely, in the same space that once erased me. Inside, the light dimmed slightly as a new song began. The announcer's voice echoed, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the bride and groom." The doors opened a little wider and I saw her, my sister glowing in white, her arm hooked in our father's. My breath caught, not out of envy, but out of a strange, fragile pride. She looked happy, and for a fleeting second, I wished I could have been part of that happiness. But then I remembered the night it all ended. The shouting, the betrayal, the way my mother's voice had cracked when she said, "You're on your own now, Clara." That memory tightened around my chest like a quiet warning, a reminder that love, once broken, doesn't return the same. Still, I straightened my posture, adjusted the silver clasp on my purse, and took my first step toward the door. The hall guard glanced at me, his polite smile fading when he saw my invitation, embossed with gold, signed by the groom himself. He hesitated, then nodded. "Welcome, Ms. Morgan." I walked in. The warmth hit me instantly. Laughter, music, perfume, all swirling together into a world I used to know too well. But no one recognized me. To them, I was just another guest, another face in the glittering crowd. And maybe that was the most poetic part of it all. They'd erased me once. And now I returned invisible yet unforgettable. As I stepped further in, I whispered to myself, "Let's see if the past still remembers my name." The orchestra swelled, and I disappeared into the light. It's strange how certain nights stay stitched to your memory, how their shadows never quite leave. For me, it was the night the world I knew ended. I was 18. My whole life packed neatly into 2 suitcases, my dreams still scribbled in notebooks full of business ideas and college applications. I had worked for years, part-time jobs, scholarships, every late-night shift I could manage, because my parents had promised that my college fund was safe. That promise was the only thing that kept me going. But promises are fragile things. That evening, I came home to find my father sitting at the dining table, papers scattered in front of him. My mother stood nearby, her expression distant, rehearsed, like she'd been preparing for a performance she didn't want to give. And my sister Emily stood by the staircase, clutching a Stanford acceptance letter like a golden ticket. I remember her smile, nervous, unsure, guilty. She wouldn't even look me in the eyes. My father cleared his throat first. "Clara, we've made a family decision. Family decision." That phrase still burns. He explained word by word that my college fund, the savings account I'd been promised since I was 13, was being redirected. Stanford was expensive, he said. Emily had a once-in-a-lifetime chance. "You're strong, Clara. You'll figure something out." I stood there frozen, my mind refusing to believe what I was hearing. I had spent years believing in hard work, believing that effort meant reward. That family meant fairness. But that night I learned, sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people who tuck you in at night. My voice cracked when I asked, "So my dreams don't matter?" My mother didn't answer. She just looked at me with that tired, disappointed expression, the kind that says, "Don't make this harder than it already is." And that's when I understood. I wasn't part of their plan anymore. I remember the weight of silence after that. It filled every corner of the room until even breathing felt loud. Finally, my father said, "Clara, we've done what we can. You'll thank us someday." Thank them? For tearing apart my future to build someone else's? I laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. The kind of laugh that comes from something breaking deep inside. Then came the shouting, not from anger, but from pain. I said things I don't even remember. They said things I can't forget. Ungrateful, selfish, jealous. Each word hit harder than the last. And when I turned to my sister for support, she whispered, "I'm sorry, but I can't say no to this." That's when I realized I was truly alone. I went upstairs, packed a small bag, and left that night. No dramatic goodbye. No one followed me. It was raining, I remember that. I stood at the edge of the driveway, soaking wet, staring back at the house that once felt like home. Every light in the window blurred into a single golden smear through the rain. I wanted someone to stop me, but no one did. That was the night Clara Miller disappeared. And somewhere between heartbreak and silence, Clara Morgan was born. The girl who once begged for belonging became the woman who needed nothing from anyone. The first few nights after I left home were the hardest. I slept in a tiny room above a bakery that smelled like sugar and loneliness. The landlady was kind enough to rent it to me without a deposit, though she warned me not to expect heating in winter. I didn't care. It was small, but it was mine. And for the first time in my life, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I found work wherever I could. Day shifts at a bookstore, night shifts cleaning offices, weekends tutoring high school students who reminded me of everything I'd lost. There were days when my hands ached so much I couldn't even lift a pen. Still, I pushed through because stopping meant remembering. And remembering hurt more than exhaustion ever could. Sometimes I'd walk past college campuses, hearing laughter spill out from dorm windows, wondering what my life might have been if things had gone differently. But then I'd whisper to myself, "No one's coming to save you, Clara, so save yourself." Those words became my armor. The years that followed were a blur of lessons learned the hard way. I failed my first business exam because I couldn't afford the textbook. I got fired from a cafe after confronting a manager who tried to underpay me. I broke down once, in a public park, under a flickering streetlight, realizing I had $12 left and no plan. But even then, something inside me refused to give up. I took online classes late at night using borrowed Wi-Fi from a library across the street. I read every free article I could find on finance, marketing, and startups. Every bit of knowledge was a brick, and slowly, I was building something solid, something that would never depend on anyone else's approval. I remember the day I registered my first small business, Solvra Designs. It wasn't much, just a freelance design agency that barely made rent. But when I saw my name on the paperwork, I cried. Not because I'd made it, but because I finally felt like I was becoming someone of my own making. There were still nights when the silence pressed too hard, when I'd stare at the ceiling, hearing echoes of my mother's voice, wondering if they ever thought of me. But then I'd remind myself of the promise I made that night I left home. I'll come back when I no longer need their approval. And so I kept going, year after year, project after project. The small business grew into something bigger: partnerships, investors, recognition. One quiet success led to another, until the girl who once slept above a bakery was sitting in her own glass office, overlooking the city skyline. But no matter how high I climbed, a part of me stayed rooted in that promise. Not revenge, not pride, just the quiet need to stand in front of them one day and say, without words, I made it. And I did it without you. So I waited, not for an apology, but for a moment that felt right. And that moment came, 11 years later, in the form of a white envelope embossed with gold. You're cordially invited to the wedding of Emily Miller and Daniel Hart. I smiled. Not out of bitterness, but understanding. Life had just handed me the moment I'd been preparing for all along. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day where life feels predictably quiet. My assistant had just dropped a stack of envelopes on my desk, and I was skimming through them absently. Contracts, invoices, partnership proposals. Nothing unusual. Then I saw it. An ivory envelope, thick and weighty, with gold embossed edges and my name written in looping handwriting that looked almost too familiar. Ms. Clara Morgan. No sender listed. I stared at it for a long moment before touching it, as if it carried something fragile, something dangerous. My first thought was a client invitation, but the moment I broke the wax seal, my breath caught. The words were elegant, formal. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Emily Miller and Daniel Hart. Emily. For a second, the world went completely still. The hum of the air conditioner, the soft city noise outside, even the ticking of the clock. Everything faded into silence. I read the card again, my fingers trembling slightly. It was real. My sister, the same sister whose name I hadn't spoken in over a decade, was getting married. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the printed date. 2 weeks from today? A part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to tear the letter apart and throw it away. But instead, I just sat there, numb. I didn't owe them anything. Not a word. Not a glance, and yet, something inside me stirred. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe closure. Maybe I wanted to see how far I'd come. Not to prove anything, but to remind myself I'd survived what should have destroyed me. I slipped the invitation back into the envelope and was about to drop it into the trash when a smaller note fell out. Handwritten, folded once, tucked between the pages. I opened it slowly. She doesn't know I invited you? Daniel Hart, the groom? My mind spun. Daniel, I remembered that name vaguely. He'd been mentioned years ago, back when Emily was in college. But why would he reach out to me? I read the note again, tracing the letters. She doesn't know I invited you. That sentence lingered like perfume. Faint, mysterious, unsettling. Why would he do that? Was it pity? Curiosity? Or did he know something my sister didn't want revealed? For days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I tried to work, the invitation caught my eye from the edge of my desk. Every time I tried to sleep, I heard that one line echo in my mind. She doesn't know I invited you? It felt less like an invitation, and more like a summons. On the 5th night, I gave in. I opened my wardrobe, staring at rows of elegant dresses. Symbols of the life I'd built from nothing. The woman I'd become. If I went, I wouldn't go as the discarded daughter who left in tears. I'd go as the woman they never expected to see again. Not to confront, not to accuse, just to be. Because sometimes the quietest return carries the loudest message. So I sent my RSVP the next morning. A simple, elegant card with only 2 words written in my neat handwriting. I'll be there. And as I sealed the envelope, I caught my reflection in the window. Calm, collected, unreadable. I whispered to my reflection, let's see what truths time has been hiding. The church stood like a memory carved in stone. Elegant, timeless, untouched by the years that had taken everything else. Golden light spilled through the tall stained glass windows, painting the marble floor with fractured colors. Soft music floated in the air. Violins, gentle and distant, like a heartbeat I hadn't heard in years. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I stepped through the doors. One click, then another. Each sound echoed through the silence, blending with the rhythm of my breath. For a moment, no one noticed me. The guests were lost in their laughter, glasses clinking, whispers weaving through the air like silk threads. The scent of white roses lingered, mixed with the faint sweetness of champagne. I stood at the back, quietly, invisible, watching. Then someone turned. It always happens like that. One curious glance that ripples through the crowd like a sudden gust of wind. A woman near the aisle paused mid-sentence, her laughter fading. Another man looked up from his glass. Then another. The room began to still. Conversations breaking off, half-finished smiles freezing in place. One by one, faces turned toward the doorway. Me. Their eyes moved over the dress. Sleek, dark, elegant. The diamonds at my wrist. The calm expression that gave away nothing. I could almost hear the questions forming in their minds. Who is she? Do we know her? Why does she look familiar? I kept walking, slow, graceful, unhurried. Every step felt deliberate, like a scene unfolding in slow motion. The orchestra continued to play, but softer now, as if even the music held its breath. And then, he saw me, Daniel, the groom, standing near the altar, hand in hand with the bride, my sister. He was mid-laugh when his eyes found mine. In an instant, the smile froze on his face. The color drained from his cheeks. His grip on Emily's hand faltered, just slightly, and that's when Emily followed his gaze. Our eyes met across the room. Her laughter died before it reached her lips. Her fingers trembled. 10 years vanished in that single heartbeat. There was no time, no sound, only the hum of the world holding still between us. I saw confusion first, then disbelief, then fear. Not the kind born from danger, but from recognition. From guilt. Her lips parted slightly, whispering something no one else could hear. My name, maybe, or the memory of it. I didn't move. I just stood there, calm, silent, unshaken. Because I knew. This was the moment everything began to unravel. The groom's eyes darted between us, panic flickering behind his carefully built smile. The bride stood frozen, her bouquet trembling in her hands. And around them the guests waited, sensing something they couldn't name. Then the music stopped. A string snapped on one of the violins, sharp and sudden, echoing through the silence like a warning. And just like that, the perfect illusion shattered. I didn't have to say a word. The silence spoke for me. For 11 years I had imagined this moment, what it would look like, how it would feel. But standing there, beneath the golden lights and painted glass, I realized no fantasy could have prepared me for the weight of their eyes. My mother was the first to move. A soft gasp, fragile, trembling, and escaped her lips. Her hand flew to her chest, pearls trembling against her skin. Her face hadn't changed much. The same perfectly arranged hair, the same careful grace. But time had etched guilt into the corners of her eyes. She blinked once, as if trying to wake from a dream she didn't want to believe. Flash. A memory. Her voice, sharp and cold. You made this choice, Clara. Don't make us regret helping you. That night, she turned away while I packed my bags. Back to the present. Her gaze found mine now, and I could see it. Recognition. And fear. Not fear of me, but of the truth I carried back with me. Then came my father, older, smaller somehow. He didn't stand, just gripped his cane with both hands, knuckles white, eyes fixed on me. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, because even he knew no one returns like this unless they've built something stronger than the pain that sent them away. Flash. His voice echoing from years ago. You're not part of this family anymore. Don't come back asking for forgiveness. The words burned like acid in my memory, yet now, they only felt distant, like echoes from a world that no longer had power over me. And then Emily, my sister, the bride. Her smile faltered just slightly on like a crack in porcelain. She tried to hide it, to keep her perfect image intact before the crowd, but her eyes gave her away. Shock, guilt, and something else. Shame. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her lips trembled, her bouquet dipped toward the floor. I could feel the whispers spreading like wildfire. Rippling through the crowd, names, guesses, questions. Is that... Wait, isn't she... Didn't they have another daughter? Each voice carried fragments of a truth they were never supposed to see resurface. The lights felt too bright. The air too heavy. Every second stretched. A slow-motion reel of recognition and regret. Flash. A memory of Emily laughing, wearing the dress I never got, holding the letter of admission that was supposed to be mine. Her arms around my mother, tears of joy, while I stood in the doorway holding nothing but silence. Back to now, her eyes begged me not to speak. But I didn't need to. The truth was already standing between us, alive, breathing, undeniable. The orchestra tried to recover, striking hesitant notes, but it was too late. The illusion of celebration had cracked wide open. For the first time in years, they were seeing me not as the daughter they erased, but as the woman who had come back from the shadows. And in that quiet, heavy moment, I realized something deeper. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about being seen, finally, painfully, completely. The sound of silver striking glass broke the tension. A soft clink, 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 deliberate, almost too calm. Daniel, the groom, rose to his feet. His smile was gentle, his posture unshaken, yet I caught the flicker of nerves in his eyes. He looked at me once, briefly, before turning to the crowd. "Before we begin the next chapter of this beautiful evening," he began, "I want to take a moment to speak about love and gratitude." The room quieted. Every word he spoke now carried weight, because no one was sure who his words were truly meant for. He lifted his glass, voice steady. "There are people in our lives who show up when we least expect them, and remind us who we truly are." A pause. A glance, subtle but unmistakable, toward me. My mother's hand stiffened around her napkin. Emily's eyes darted between us, her composure slipping inch by inch. Daniel continued, "When my business failed years ago, I learned something about this family, and about who stands by you when the world turns its back." He smiled faintly. "And sometimes that person isn't the one who shares your name, but the one who shares your pain." My heart stilled. No one else knew what he meant. But I did. The flashback unfolded silently in my mind. 2 years ago, a small office on the verge of collapse, Daniel pacing in despair. A phone call. A meeting. My quiet voice telling him, "I'll help you. But you owe me honesty, not secrecy." It was never about love. It was about trust. A rare, honest debt between two people who knew what it meant to be broken. He continued his toast, careful, elegant. "This wedding, this moment, it's a result of kindness, patience, and unseen sacrifices. I stand here today because someone believed I could rebuild." A murmur rippled through the hall. Emily's lips tightened into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her hand clenched Daniel's arm, possessive, fragile. He turned to her with a practiced tenderness. "And to my beautiful bride, Emily, may we build a life worthy of every truth we've hidden and every truth we still owe." That line landed like glass shattering under silk. The guest smiled, unaware of its meaning. But my family wasn't fooled. My father's brow furrowed. My mother exhaled sharply. Emily's face paled, a fraction too late to hide it. And me? I just smiled. A quiet, knowing curve of the lips, enough to make the tension grow, enough to make them wonder. Because for once, I didn't need to speak to be heard. Every silence around me spoke louder than words ever could. I lifted my own glass, raised it toward Daniel. A silent acknowledgement. He nodded back, the faintest glimmer of guilt behind his gratitude. The orchestra began again, soft and uneasy. Laughter resumed, brittle, forced. And through it all, I sat there, calm, collected, untouchable. The woman they'd erased had become the quiet truth no one could ignore. The string quartet played a soft waltz, graceful, calm, deceiving. But beneath the music, something had begun to crack. From across the table, I watched Emily's smile stiffen like porcelain under pressure. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held her glass, eyes locked on Daniel with a look that could shatter diamonds. He avoided her gaze too carefully. That's when I knew the unraveling had begun. "Daniel," she whispered, low but sharp enough for those near her to hear. "What was that toast about?" He tried to brush it off with a faint laugh. "Just gratitude, love. That's all." But her tone changed, quiet, desperate. Gratitude for whom exactly? Around them, conversations faltered. The hum of the crowd dimmed. The laughter softened into uneasy glances. Her voice never rose. That was the unsettling part. The confrontation wasn't loud. It was cold, trembling, real. Daniel set his glass down. "Emily, not now," he said softly, his jaw tightening. She leaned closer, her words cutting through the music. "I know you invited her. Don't lie to me." Every breath in the room seemed to stop. The words hung there, invisible but unmistakable. A few heads turned toward me, slowly, cautiously, like they weren't sure if they were supposed to. My mother's hand clutched my father's arm. He whispered something under his breath, something that sounded like, "Not here." Emily's voice cracked for the first time. "You brought her here, Daniel. After everything this family did?" The last part slipped out before she could stop it. And that was it. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the violinist stopped mid-bow, uncertain if the music should continue. No one moved. No one breathed. I looked at Emily, her chest rising and falling fast, her perfect image unraveling in slow motion. Her words had done what I never needed to do. She'd peeled back the first layer of the truth, and now everyone could smell the past beneath the perfume of celebration. Daniel tried to steady the situation, forcing a polite smile. "I think emotions are high tonight. Let's not—" But Emily's eyes were glassy, her voice trembling between anger and heartbreak. "Do you even know what they did to her?" she said. Her words almost a whisper, but they carried across the hall like thunder. She wasn't just forgotten, she was erased. I felt the sting of tears in my throat. Not sadness, but the weight of recognition. The guests exchanged looks, murmurs spreading like ripples on water. No shouting, no chaos, just a quiet, collective understanding that something sacred had been broken. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping the marble. "That's enough," he said, voice cold, brittle. But even he sounded smaller than he used to. My mother looked down at her hands, silent, ashamed. Emily's words trembled now. "She deserved better," she whispered. "Not to anyone in particular, maybe not even to me." And for a brief moment, I saw the sister I once loved, buried beneath years of guilt and silence. I wanted to reach out, to tell her it was okay, that I hadn't come for revenge, just truth. But I didn't move. I didn't need to, because the truth had already begun to move through the room on its own. Quiet, unstoppable, alive. The music tried to return, but the melody faltered. The night that began with celebration had shifted into something else entirely, a reckoning wrapped in elegance. And through it all, I sat still, calm, composed. The woman they erased had become the mirror none of them wanted to face. The celebration carried on outside, forced laughter, scattered music, broken fragments of what used to be joy. But inside the dressing room, it was silent. A silence that felt sacred, heavy with everything that had been left unsaid for 11 years. Emily stood in front of the mirror, her white gown glowing faintly under the soft bulbs. Her makeup was perfect, except for the mascara smudged beneath her eyes. Her reflection looked like two versions of her, the bride the world saw, and the sister she'd buried. When I entered, she didn't turn around. We both looked at her reflection, her eyes, red-rimmed, meeting mine through the glass. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It was just the sound of our breathing, steady, uneven, human. Then, in a trembling whisper, she said, "You could have ruined me tonight." I let the words hang there, not in accusation, but in quiet truth. She wasn't wrong. I could have. I could have told everyone what happened, how my parents had stolen from me, how she had watched it happen in silence, how I left with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of promises. But that's not why I came. I took a slow breath and met her eyes in the mirror. "I didn't come to ruin you, Emily." My voice was calm, steady. "I came to forgive you." She turned then, really turned, eyes wide, lips trembling as if she didn't believe what she'd just heard. Her voice cracked. "Forgive me? After everything I let them do to you?" I smiled faintly. "Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about me." I stepped closer. "I don't need their apology anymore. Or yours. I just needed to stop carrying it." Her hand rose halfway, then dropped, as if unsure whether to reach for me. Tears welled up in her eyes, I thought you'd hate me forever, she whispered. I did, I said honestly. For a long time. I hated you, and them, and myself for letting it all define me. But somewhere along the way, I realized hating you kept me in that house, even after I left it. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She looked at me, not as the sister she'd overshadowed, not as a ghost from the past, but as the woman who'd survived it all. I placed my hand gently on the vanity beside her. Tonight wasn't about revenge, Emily. It was about being seen. One last time. She nodded slowly, the weight of years softening her face. And for the first time since we were girls, she whispered, I'm sorry. Those 2 words didn't erase the past. But they were enough. Enough to breathe again. We stood side by side, staring into the mirror. 2 sisters, one dressed in white, the other draped in quiet grace. Between us, a reflection not of guilt or pride, but of release. In that mirror, I saw what I came for. Not victory, not power, peace. I turned to leave, pausing at the door. She spoke again, softly. Will I ever see you again? I smiled. Maybe someday. When the truth doesn't hurt so much. And with that, I stepped out, leaving her with her reflection and myself with my freedom. The music had changed. Softer now. Slower. Like the night itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. I walked back into the hall. Every face turned, but no one spoke. It wasn't fear that silenced them this time. It was something deeper. Recognition. They knew who I was now. Not the girl they had erased, but the woman who had returned without needing to destroy anyone to be seen. My mother's eyes followed me, wet, wide, trembling with words she didn't know how to say. My father looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of the past had finally caught up to him. Emily stood at the edge of the dance floor, her hands clasped in front of her, a faint, fragile smile on her lips, one that said thank you without sound. No one tried to stop me. No one asked me to stay. They simply stepped aside, and I walked through them, calm and unshaken. Every step felt like closing a chapter. Every heartbeat whispered, it's over. As I reached the door, I glanced back one last time. The chandelier lights glowed like stars trapped in glass. For a moment, I saw us as we could have been. A family not built on pride, but on love. Then I blinked and the image was gone. Outside, the night air was cool and still. The moon hung low, soft and forgiving. I breathed deeply, my chest lighter than it had felt in years. And in that silence, my voice, soft, steady, rose within me. Some revenge doesn't need words. Only presence. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't about letting them forget what they did. It's about reminding yourself that you survived it and grew beyond it. I looked up at the stars, smiled faintly, and whispered to the wind, I'm free now. Then I walked away, not as the girl they'd disowned, but as the woman who chose peace over pain and silence over chaos. And somewhere behind me, the music played on, but this time, it no longer belonged to me. The road stretched before me, empty, quiet, shimmering under the moonlight. My heels clicked softly against the pavement, each step echoing like punctuation at the end of a long, unfinished sentence. Behind me, laughter flickered faintly from the hall, brittle, distant, fading with every step I took. It no longer belonged to me. And that was okay. For years, I thought revenge meant proving them wrong. But tonight, I learned it means proving myself right. I didn't need to shout my pain into their faces. I didn't need to expose them, humiliate them, or break what was already broken. All I needed was to stand in the same room as them, unshaken, unchanged by their absence, and walk away whole. The night wind brushed against my skin, cool and forgiving, and as I looked up, the stars seemed to whisper what my heart already knew. Sometimes the loudest revenge is silence. Sometimes the greatest victory is peace. And sometimes, walking away is the most powerful answer. I smiled to myself, not out of triumph, but out of release. Because true power doesn't come from being right. It comes from being free. And in that moment, beneath the quiet sky with nothing left to prove, I knew I had finally taken everything they once tried to take from me. My voice, my peace, myself. Fade out. The music soft, serene, and distant, as the lights of the wedding hall disappear behind me, and I step into a future that finally belongs to me.